You're listening to Spurscast, episode 635. My name is Paul Garcia, and I'm your host here on the Spurscast. Today I'll be joined by Project Spurs founder Michael DeLeon. In this episode, Mike and I will review the Spurs' last 3 games and how the team is doing through 4 games of the early season. Let's jump right into this episode with Mike. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's one of those rare times of the year where it seems like all my sports are going on at the same time, so it's been pretty fun month so far, I guess.
Yeah, you see my tweets, so like I'm good right now because I'm only down to 2 sports that I even watch or even know anything about. That's basketball and soccer at this point. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with the. I feel bad because I know UTSA, the college team here, is really good, and that's actually my alma mater. But I've literally not paid attention to any of it except for I know they're undefeated or something like that. All right, so let's go to get started here, Mike, into this first Spurscast episode. In this episode. So let's begin with our first topic and discuss, how the Spurs have done since I last recorded a week ago. I believe it was Colin Reed was my guest last week. So the Spurs have lost their last 3 games, but they were close losses, and in a way, it's almost a very optimistic view because of how they lost these games and how close they've been. So let's first go back to Friday. The Spurs fall to the Denver Nuggets 102-96 in Denver on the road. Denver was favored by 7. The Spurs did fall behind by 11 points in this game. However, in the final minute, they had it down to a 2-possession game. Keldon Johnson was the leading scorer with 27 points. Derek White had 16 points. DeJounte Murray 15 points. And Jakob Poeltl 15 points. Then the next night, the Spurs had to fly back to San Antonio to host the Milwaukee Bucks, the defending champions. Milwaukee gets the win here, 121-111 by 10. Milwaukee was favored by 7 in this one. The Spurs again fell into a hole where they fell behind by 13, but they had it down to a 2-possession game with 4:24 left in this game. After that 4:24 mark, though, Milwaukee ended up kind of just pushing that lead a little bit further, and they won by 10 points. Doug McDermott was the leading scorer on this night with 25 points. Keldon Johnson had another 20-point night. Lonnie Walker IV came off the bench with 17 points, and then Derek White had 14 points. And then just the most recent game was this really exciting game. It was Tuesday in San Antonio. The Spurs lost in overtime to the Los Angeles Lakers here in town. The Spurs were favored by 2 after it was announced that LeBron James would be out of the game, so there was no LeBron James, so the Spurs were barely favored. This was an interesting game. The Spurs actually built a 12-point lead, but then they couldn't hold it. DeJounte Murray had a chance to win the game in regulation with an 18-foot mid-range jumper. The shot did not go in, so then the game goes to overtime. In overtime, with time kind of getting close here, Devin Vassell, the Spurs drew up a play for him. Coach Pop drew up a play for a 3-pointer for Devin. He missed that shot. Had it gone in, they would have put the Spurs up by 1 with some time left, and who knows what would have happened, but it went out, and then from there the Lakers kind of held on there for the victory. It was an interesting game because of the atmosphere. There was a bunch of Lakers fans here in San Antonio. The arena was really loud. It was tough for the Spurs players down the stretch in crunch time shooting free throws because they were basically getting booed and getting a lot of distractions to try to make those free throws. Jakob Poeltl had a very good game. 27 points, 26 of those points in the paint. Lonnie Walker IV comes off the bench with 21 points. DeJounte Murray had a triple-double, 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 15 assists. And then Devin Vassell had a strong game as well, 19 points off the bench. So I know that's a lot of information, Mike. What are some of your thoughts on some of these past few games?
I guess the most encouraging thing is that they've been in every game. They're coming in, losing the last 3 games, and really the only win has been that blowout in opening night. But they've been in there and they've been in position to win. It just seems like things haven't bounced their way at the end. And that's just, I honestly, some games with the personnel you have, they're going to go through that. But at some point, I think that these are going to be some winnable games. They're going to find a way to win in these late game situations. And it's just going to take that. Last night it was free throw shooting that really put them in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so it's things like that. But it's going to be that kind of a season where, but I think the encouraging thing is you're not seeing blowout losses. You're not seeing them getting totally blown out by the Bucks or the Lakers, even though Russ had a crazy game last night without LeBron. It seems like somehow he played better.
Yeah, he did.
And you're not seeing them totally get blown out. So there's, I think, a lot to take away from all of these games.
Yeah, and so just 2 thoughts there. Kind of what you said is that the fact that they're right there in all these games. These were all especially that Lakers game. That was a very winnable game for them. And they are 1-3 when you see their record to start the season. But I think in one good way, the entire league's really not doing very strong right now. There's not a lot of teams really standing out. The only 2 teams out west that are undefeated so far, as you and I record this on a Wednesday evening, are the Warriors and the Jazz. Everybody else has lost at least 1 game. And I think the big test for the Spurs, because they're showing that they can compete with even the top teams is going to be how do they handle those teams that are kind of in their range? You know, the Indianas, I was going to say Charlotte, but Charlotte's actually playing well. You know, the Sacramentos, the New Orleans, those kind of teams, the kind of teams that are kind of level with the Spurs. San Antonio now should be able to beat a lot of those teams. So I'm going to be very interested once they get out of playing all these like, you know, top playoff level teams, what they look like against a team that's kind of more so at their range. And so I think that if San Antonio can win those games against those teams, then they have a good chance of you know, coming away with a pretty good record here, definitely past their Vegas odds. So again, it's only 4 games, but right now this is very encouraging despite the 1-3 record that the Spurs are, you know, competing against some of these top teams. All right, so our second topic, Mike, let's look at some just kind of what the data is saying right now. And again, it is a very early sample size, so we don't want to you know, put too much emphasis in these numbers. But I just kind of want to go through kind of the top 10 things that the Spurs have been doing on each end of the floor, and then the bottom 10 where they really have some concerns. And Mike, I'm going to ask you as I go through this, like if you kind of trust that, you know, by season's end, they're going to not be exactly in at this place, but kind of be in that range. So let's first begin with the offense. They are 11th right now in offense, scoring 1.08 points per possession. Let's look at the areas where their strengths right now on offense and where they're top 10. Fast break scoring, they are 5th right now amongst in the league. Turnover percentage, they're 9th. Assist percentage, you know how much of their assists are converting on their field goal makes. They're 6th. Assists, they're 1st in the league at 29.5. In terms of attempts at the restricted area, they're 8th. Floater attempts, they're 3rd. And then floater accuracy, they are 2nd. So they're shooting very well on those floater type of shots called the non-restricted area. In the paint points, they're 2nd. Mid-range attempts, they're 4th. And then wide open 3-point percentage, they are 9th. So I know I threw a lot of numbers, Mike, there at the top 10. Which of those do you trust, or which of those don't you trust? That do you think that's going to eventually fall off when things start to regress?
I mean, I think assists are really high right now, and I think they'll still have a high assist percentage.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's going to stay that high.
Okay.
A lot of those other ones, like restricted area, I mean, that's a lot. I think that has a lot to do with the personnel. Mm-hmm. I mean, Keldon's going to be scoring inside. DeJounte, a lot of times scoring inside. I mean, Jakob, as much as he's been scoring, that's going to come inside. So I'm not going to be too surprised to see that in the paint points as well as the floater. You know, hopefully that you'll start to see that. I mean, I think if you see around where they're at with the 3-point percentage, I think that's obviously a good thing. And, you know, if you start getting more from Bryn and you start seeing McDermott knock those down a little bit more, then that number may fluctuate a little bit, but I think it'll pretty much stay around average.
Okay, I kind of agree with you as well. You know, a lot of these numbers, I don't know if they'll stay top 10 in these areas, but I think they're going to be very close to where they're at. The ones that I'm a little concerned about that I think are going to fall off eventually are the floater accuracy number. I think they're going to continue to take those floater type of attempts, those non-restricted shots, but their accuracy is very high. It's right now at 53.8% as I look at it, and that's 2nd best in the league. And that's a very hard shot to keep, you know, over 50%. No team's actually able to do that. That's just it's almost like an impossible thing to do. And then I do want to see, I think they're going to be one of the top teams of getting into the paint because, like you said, based on personnel, but I do want to see by like the 2nd month of the season, by the time like December gets here, you know, how are defenses scouting them? If they're still having a little bit of trouble from 3, some of their non-shooters, then I wonder how defenses are guarding if they're packing the paint more like we saw last season, or how they're guarding them. But aside from that, I think a lot of these numbers will kind of stay where they are, you know, in that kind of range as the season progresses. Now let's look at some concerning things on offense, and you tell me again if you trust this data or if you think that you know they'll improve in some of these areas. Free throw rate, they are officially now dead last in the league. They're last in terms of their free throw rate amongst all teams. 3-point attempts are still, even though yes they've increased them on a team level amongst the league, though they're still 25th right now in 3-point attempts, and then 3-point percentage they are 21st right now. What are your thoughts on those 3 stats?
I mean, I would say with free throw rate, I mean, I think you hope that comes up, but it's just having seen some of the games that we've seen, especially yesterday, I mean, it seems like there was a stretch of a few minutes there where they just could not knock down a single free throw, and that tanked that number a little bit. So I think at some point you hope that will come up a little bit.
I would say that, one concerning thing regarding that free throw is, aside from Keldon, like, you look at the stats, like, nobody's really getting to the line, at least more than once per game. Keldon's the only player with 5.3 attempts. And then I think that something that's been brought up is that the fact that they don't have like an all-star or like that, that go-to player now, I don't know if they're going to get as much, respect from the refs. I don't think, there's going to be a lot of times where I think, yeah, exactly. So I just think that, these young players, I don't know if they're going to get the calls that other stars would have got, or even a player like DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge would have got. Those players had more stature in the league, and I feel like, yes, they got their calls, on their drives, whereas some of these young Spurs players, DeJounte, Keldon, Devin Vassell, Lonnie, I don't know if they're going to get as many calls, and so I think that is going to be a very concerning stat. I am interested to see where the 3-point percentage ends up, because they've had like 2 bad shooting nights from 3 already start this year, but they've also had 2 good ones. So I do want to see if their accuracy can improve, and then the attempts again. I just I just feel like that's going to be where they're at. Even though, yes, they added some 3-point shooters, I think that it's still a very low volume team amongst their peers in the league. So again, that's kind of where the Spurs are on offense, Spurscast listeners, initially through these first 4 games. Let's go to defense now. Where they're at. Currently, they're 15th in the league, so league average defense right now, allowing 1.06 points per possession. Where are they top 10? Right now, opponent free throw rate, so they're 9th right now, and that's something they did last year very well. Opponent fast break points, they're doing a great job of getting back on the break, not letting teams score on them in the fast break. Opponent turnover percentage, this is something new for the Spurs. They're being very aggressive, and Coach Pop is letting them kind of gamble a little bit more for steals, for deflections, and this is something where they normally weren't like this type of a defense, but because they have a lot of long athletic wings who they play in lineups, they're able to be a little bit more aggressive. Steals, they're fifth, so again we see that aggressive defense. Points off turnovers, they're really taking advantage of teams turning the ball over and getting out on the break and scoring well. Opponent mid-range attempts, they're forcing teams to take a pretty good chunk of their shots from the mid-range. I think that's a lot of it is the Lakers data. And then opponent 3-point attempts, they're third right now in the league, so they're really limiting 3-point attempts. And then opponent 3-point percentage, they're guarding the 3 well, 9th. But again, I think that's a lot of data from the Lakers and the Magic there. The NBA is back, and at DraftKings Sportsbook, an authorized sports betting partner of the NBA, the key to victory is a strong starting 5. New customers can bet just $5 on any NBA team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. So why not make your roster Washington, 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 and oh yeah, Washington. DraftKings Sportsbook customers can also get skin in the game with new same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets from the same game for a bigger payout. The more legs you add, the more money you can win. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TBPN. Bet just $5 on any NBA team to win their game and win $200 in free bets. If they win, you win with promo code TBPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an authorized sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. So Mike, out of those areas on the top 10 on defense, what do you think is going to kind of stay, and what do you think is going to kind of eventually, move a little bit worse?
I wouldn't be surprised to see the turnover percentage stay. I mean, they've been like forcing a lot of turnovers. I know in that, I think it's the Bucks game, they forced 20 against the Magic. They forced 16. So you can see that was a priority. Must have been in training camp, like defense, and I think that's also a product, also of having younger, more athletic guys out there, and going after loose balls and things like that. So, as far as what won't, I guess that one honestly, it's so early. I haven't really noticed any major patterns there yet.
Okay. So yeah, I'm with you. And so some of that, I do trust their free throw rate. I think they're going to be okay enough putting the opponents on the free throw line just because that's kind of what Pop wants in his defensive philosophy. Fast break points as well. I think that they're going to be a good transition team, as long as they stay focused there. Like you said, with this aggressive new approach on defense, I think that they can be top and toward the top of the league in turnover percentage for the opponent, steals, points off turnovers. I am interested to see if the mid-range attempts area can kind of stay there, forcing mid-range attempts from opponents because, teams do like to attack them. And then the 3-point percentage, again, I want to see more teams that they face before I can, make a determination there if they're going to really be one of the top 10 and not allowing threes. In terms of bottom 10, where are they having their issues on defense right now? Teams are getting to the paint a lot. They're 26th in allowing attempts in the restricted area, the closest area to the basket. They're 24th in not letting teams take those floater shots. So teams really aren't having to get, take those those bad shots, which are those floater shots. In accuracy, when teams do take those floater shots, the Spurs are 26. Teams are making those shots pretty well. And then points in the paint, the Spurs are 29. Teams are scoring a lot of points in the paint against them. What are your thoughts on those areas?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is kind of like a trend that started last year. I noticed it a lot, especially on defense on Russ last night, because I would see where they made the decision to either go under the screen and try to prevent his penetration, or go over, and it just seems like they made those decisions kind of late, and they were more often than not, like in that case with a streaky shooter like Westbrook, I prefer they give him the space to shoot instead of letting him drive because he was driving, and a lot of times if he'd get past the primary defender, then he'd have somebody trying to turn his body and defend at the rim, and that was just too much of a challenge for somebody as fast as him.
I agree with that, and this is something that Doug McDermott kind of brought up earlier before in the preseason. Actually, the fact that they are going to play small, so they're going to be more, the rim's going to be open a little bit more for defenses when they can penetrate and get through the initial set of their defense. And like you just said there, Westbrook was a perfect example of. I was getting some tweets, mentions of people were like, because when he had 5 fouls, it was like, he might foul out. And in my opinion, the Spurs needed him to foul out because he wasn't doing the normal Russ stuff. Yes, he was taking some wild jumpers here and there, but a lot of his points did come in the paint. I think he had 22 points in the paint, and that's when Russ is most dangerous, when he's able to get to the rim and get his closest shots because he's a really good finisher. So yeah, I think that's something to watch, and because they play a little bit smaller, it's going to really be on them to communicate a little bit better in their rotations. But I think that's an area that might stay all year is the scoring in the paint area for them. All right, so now let's just look at a few of the core players here that have started off the season. So let's first focus on some offense for some of these players. Keldon Johnson, right now he's leading the team with 18 points per game. He's, like I mentioned earlier, he's getting to the free throw line the most, 5.3 attempts. He's shooting well, really well on his floaters and mid-range. He is 0 of 10 from 3. And then he's also, like I mentioned, the team leader in getting to the free throw line. But I am a little concerned that eventually those floater shots that he's making, those mid-range shots, are going to come down, and then we'll see where his scoring comes from. Jakob Poeltl is second on the team in scoring with 16 points per game. He's grabbing 6.3 offensive boards, so he's really doing a great job on the offensive glass. He's also facilitating well, 3.5 assists per game. And like I mentioned earlier, he had 26 points in the paint alone against the Lakers. Some things that I've noticed, facilitating more from either the elbow or even from the post. And the Spurs are actually giving him more opportunity to go into the post, especially if he has a mismatch. He had a few shots there go against the Lakers where he kind of had a smaller defender on him and he backed him down and kind of just scored there really easily. DeJounte Murray is scoring 15 points per game, third on the team in points, 9 assists per game, so he's now the team leader in assists with DeMar DeRozan gone. He is struggling right now, DeJounte, with this shot in both inside and outside. He is the team leader in drives and setting up teammates. Lonnie Walker the fourth, 15 points per game there as well with DeJounte, 3.3 assists. He's shooting well from 38% from the 3-point line. He's also driving more. He's putting the ball on the floor, and he's actually shooting and creating pretty well for his teammates. When he drives the ball, very, very close to the Derek White levels when look at the data. Derek White is averaging 13.3 points per game. He's second on the team with 6.5 assists, being that secondary playmaker next to DeJounte. He is also struggling with the shot from both areas, inside and out, and but he's very balanced when he drives the ball. And then Devin Vassell, 12 points per game off the bench, 2 assists. He's shooting well from 3, 45%. And then Doug McDermott starting 11.5 points per game, 45% from 3. So, yeah, I don't know if you don't have to talk about all these players, but who in your opinion on offense has kind of stuck out to you?
A few different players, because the one question I think before the season we had was who's going to step up into that role? And obviously it's not going to be one person. It seems like the one thing this data all tells you is that it's kind of by association. It's going to be a group that does it, and on any given night, it can be Keldon. Mm-hmm. It can even be Vassell. That's another thing. I really like what Murray and Jakob are doing together. It seems like when they get going, I mean, DeJounte's vision has been really good, and Jakob's been able to finish a lot. But Lonnie's the one that so far has seemed, I mean, he had one game where he was off, but he seems to have been the most consistent now over like the first 4 games. And so I think that's kind of one thing that a lot of people want to see, especially after, they couldn't get that extension done, is he kind of bet on himself. And then also, McDermott, I think, obviously he's had some struggles a little bit with the shot, but when it's falling, it looks really good. And I think what a lot of people don't know about him is that he's not like your typical, like spot up 3-point shooter. I mean, he moves around a lot on offense, and that's how he gets a lot of points. And he can drive and he can get to the basket and things like that. So that's been kind of fun to see so far early this season.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, with Lonnie, like you said, he's kind of betting on himself. And that's kind of what me and Colin talked about last week. This is his season now to is he going to get that kind of like that mid-level exception, which is all that a team can offer. Most teams can offer him because a lot of teams want to have cap space, or will he outplay that and actually, command more? And then a team with cap space will have to actually give him a really good offer, or maybe the Spurs will have to match. So yeah, Lonnie's definitely off to a good start. And one thing also that's really interesting, again, when you just look at the numbers, when you look at his drives, I mean, his balance and shooting, either taking a shot, getting to the free throw line, or creating for teammates, is actually very similar to Derek White. So, he's kind of showing a lot more playmaking than he has in the past, early on in the season. And then now let's just look at a few players on defense. Again, I'm gonna look at just some individual stats, and you can just tell me your thoughts on a few of these players. Keldon is averaging 1 steal a game. Jakob Poeltl, 4.5 defensive rebounds, 1 steal, and 1.3 blocks. Contested shots also stick out for Poeltl amongst his teammates. DeJounte Murray, 9 defensive rebounds, continuing to kind of command the glass there and take over there. 2.3 steals. He stands out on the team in deflections, steals, defensive rebounds. Lonnie, 3.5 defensive rebounds. He's standing out in deflections and defensive rebounds. So that's a new one for Lonnie. It's kind of, he last season, he didn't stand out so much in the deflections, but he's being a little bit more active on defense as well. Derek White, 2 steals, 1 block. I think he's also the team leader in charges as well. Steals are sticking out, defensive field goal percentage, contested shots, and blocks. So Derek's one of those players on defense where a lot of the you may not see it on the box score, but he really has an impact in a lot of different areas on defense. And then lastly, Vassell, 1.8 steals. Of course, he's doing really good with deflections still. And then, yeah, so like I mentioned. So any of those players, are their defensive numbers stick out to you?
I mean, this is, I think, a season where we're starting to see some growth a little bit. Obviously, Vassell's one where you're going to see, and we've seen that so far, but the biggest one to me is Poeltl. I mean, he just seems like he's playing at a different level so far this year, and I think you notice it because as soon as he heads to the bench, there's a huge drop-off. And, Eubanks come in and get, clean up a little bit around the basket and catch a pass and dunk and things like that. But what he's able to do in the offense is different. And then on defense, he's not quite the same player. I mean, we saw one shot where Anthony Davis went up, and Anthony Davis seems to be he looks strong as ever and got blocked by Jakob. So I'm really starting to see a lot more improved defense out of him. So that's one that's really stood out, I think, to me. And I think, especially when you have a smaller lineup, you really need that one guy to be in there and to be that rim protector, and he's done a good job of that.
Yeah, I think Jakob's versatility has really shown on defense because you look at his matchups. In this last 3 games, he guarded Nikola Jokic, he guarded Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then he guarded Anthony Davis. And so the fact that he actually did a pretty good job against Giannis, though, when you look at some of the numbers there, no one's going to stop Giannis. Obviously, he's a former MVP. But when you look at one of the things that Cleaning the Glass sends out through their push alerts on email, is they actually show which player the night before had a really bad game compared to their averages. And Giannis actually had a pretty bad game against the Spurs, even though yes, he put up the stats. And again, that was a lot of Jakob there who had that one-on-one matchup. Pop was purposely subbing in Jakob to match Giannis's minutes. So again, he's shown a lot more versatility. I agree with you on defense and on offense as well, like we talked about earlier. The fact that he's averaging 16 points per game and he pretty much only shoots inside. So that's he's a really efficient player right now on both ends and what Jakob is doing for this team. Okay, and then lastly, just some notes and updates with the roster. The Spurs have officially assigned Josh Primo, Joe Wieskamp, and Devontae Cacok to the Austin training camp. The Austin Spurs, they're training in San Antonio, but they have all three of those players have been assigned to Austin with the Austin team. And then Doug McDermott did sustain an injury, so the first injury for the team right now. He got hurt in that game against the Lakers, and I think it was like in the third quarter. And so the Spurs, rolled him out for the rest of the game, and then he's going to be out on Thursday against the Mavs with what they're calling right knee inflammation. Did you have any thoughts there, Mike, with those notes and updates?
Just keep an eye on Austin, because they're putting together what looks to be a pretty talented roster now that Primo and Wieskamp are there. They've also got Damian Dotson, who was playing really well for the Knicks a few years ago. And then also, obviously, with McDermott out, I mean, I know a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads for wondering why Keita Bates-Diop was playing so much. That's why, because McDermott was out, and so he'll probably see more minutes, and I felt like he kind of earned those minutes in last night's game, and he seemed to be up there, and he's able to do a lot more than a lot of the other players that you can sub in. I think he can actually knock down, some outside shots, and he's on defense seems to be a lot more present and able to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's why he was always part of it was the Doug McDermott injury, but then also I think, just his defensive versatility as well. He's able to switch onto bigs, onto Anthony Davis, onto different players. And then, like you said, he's there to spot up in the corner if you need him as an offensive threat. And it was interesting that Pop didn't go to Keldon Johnson down the stretch there in the fourth quarter and also overtime. He kind of kept Keldon, on the bench. And then Bryn Forbes' his rotation spot has kind of looked a little interesting. Pop's kind of, he's kind of only played him in the second quarters of pretty much all these games. And then even against the Lakers, he really didn't see much action after that second quarter. So, that'll be something to watch, because I know that, with Primo going to Austin right now, a lot of fans want Primo to get those minutes that Bryn has. But again, we'll kind of see if Bryn continues, it's only 4 games right now, but if Bryn continues to kind of fall out of the rotation, who knows what happens, who ends up getting some of those minutes. So don't forget to visit ProjectSpurs.com, Spurscast listeners. Steven Anderson is continuing to provide his analysis. He's got a new series called Going for Three after each of the Spurs' games. Those are his new way of analyzing a game. Mike, you wrote your recent piece after that Bucks game. It was called Key Takeaways from the Spurs' loss to the Bucks first 3 games, where you kind of looked at some of the takeaways from the Spurs' initial 3 games. Ben Bornstein is getting ready for the draft later on at the end of the season. It's called it's his latest piece called Sleep Now in the Draft: 3 Players to Know for 2022. And then also, I finally provided or released the Spurs player database, so that's over on Project Spurs. And again, it's got some cool analysis. I use the NBA.com some data there, and I kind of mix some different unique stats that aren't on some kind of just some unique stats, like what percentage of Spurs' threes were wide open, how are the Spurs shooting on pull-up threes, what percentage of their threes are pull-up threes, those kind of stats, and then also like offensive and defensive matchups. So you can find a lot of those unique stats there on our Project Spurs Spurs player database. Okay, so thanks again to Mike for joining me here on the Spurscast and for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.